So we begin today's class. The date is 11th March 1885 and Sri Ramakrishna is sitting with the devotees in his house, in the devotees' house. And there are people who have just now finished an argument. Narendra and Girish, they were arguing about whether an incarnation or whether God can incarnate as a human being. And at the end, M makes some remarks. M listens to all the discussions very carefully, but at the same time, he has his own opinion and he is trying to express that. Being an householder, he knows the limitations of an householder and he believes or he knows that there is a huge difference between Narendra and Girish Ghosh. Both of them were arguing. One was arguing from the point of view of an householder, and Naren was supposed to be the carrier of Sri Ramakrishna's message. Sri Ramakrishna knew that. So he was trying to explain to both that from different standpoints, different viewpoints, both were correct. The rules and the attitude of a householder and the rules and attitude of a monastic can be different. Their approaches are different to spiritual life. And M, who is a witness and a householder himself, has the wisdom to understand the difference between the two. He says what is true for Girish Chandra Ghosh may not be true for Narendra. That's why Thakur is trying to reconcile both. And he has a different message for both these group of devotees who used to come to him. If you remember, many times he used to tell his would-be monastic disciples like Naren, Tarak and all the others who later on became his monastic disciples to come on a different day. There were certain days reserved for them when householders could not come. The reason being that he did not want to mix up the teachings he gave to different types of people. The teachings meant for householders, if not properly understood by monastics, would put them into some certain kind of confusion. And what he wanted to convey to Naren and other people who would be leading a monastic life would be a bit confusing or discouraging to some of the householders. They had their own path, and when the right time comes, M knew that they will be also fit to practice certain things which Sri Ramakrishna thought was absolutely important if one has to attain to any degree of spirituality. Now the central point of the conversation according to M is to have faith in the words of the Guru. Now he says, he is just after the conversation is over, before the next conversation start, before the next recording of the next conversation takes place, he is, when all the devotees have dispersed, M is thinking to himself on his way back home. He says, if God does not reveal himself by his grace, by God's grace, what can be done? Sri Ramakrishna has said it, I shall put my faith in the incarnation of God. He has himself taught faith, faith, faith in the words of the Guru. I have made you the pole star of my life. Never shall I lose my way in the sea of this world. Now these are very reassuring words because M has now accepted Sri Ramakrishna as his Guru. And the pole star, can everybody hear me? Some of them. Okay. I think all of you can hear me. Now, when M is saying that I have made you the pole star of my life, all of you know the significance of a pole star. Pole star is the only star in the constellation which does not move. It appears in the same place, and all the other stars, they change their position according to the seasons. But the pole star remains fixed and can be found at one particular location, practically at one particular location. So pole star is an eternal star which does not change its position according to the seasons. In other words, it is of a more permanent nature than the other stars. Other stars keep changing their position, their direction of their movement, and other things change. But the pole star doesn't change; it seems to be in the same place. So Sri Ramakrishna is the pole star around which M is trying to build up his life. Says he is my eternal support, and I shall never lose my way in this sea of the world if I hold on to the pole star of Sri Ramakrishna, that is Sri Ramakrishna. Dhruva Tara, that is the Bengali word that is used. Dhruva means pole star, Dhruva Tara. Tara means star. So he says, I have made you the pole star of my life, and never shall I lose my way in this sea of the world. By God's grace, I have developed faith in his words, in Sri Ramakrishna's words. Now M is trying to find out what attitude he should have, what particular attitude he should have towards Sri Ramakrishna. After hearing all the conversations, the different attitudes with which Narendra, Girish and others are approaching Sri Ramakrishna, M is now keen to think loudly for our benefit. What should his attitude be? And what should others' attitude should be? Now he says, by God's grace I have developed faith in his words. I shall continue to believe what he says. Let others do what they like. Why should I give up such faith? Faith that is rare even among gods. He says, by some good chance, by some good fortune, I have faith in the words of an incarnation who happens to be my guru. And why should I believe what others say who are lesser human beings, lesser mortals? Why should I change my opinion listening to the discussion of other people? I should not be doing it. If I have developed a faith by his grace, by God's grace, then which is rare even among gods. Even gods don't have, the different deities like Indra and all, they also don't have that kind of faith in the power of Brahman or the power of the spirit. But if I have that, then why should I give it up? Have I to become another Faust? Faust is a philosopher with intellectual discussions, and is trying to explain what happens to people who engage in idle discussions. The consequence of idle discussions of philosophers has been very clearly understood by M, who is or who was trained to be a philosopher himself. As part of his Western education or the training he received in college in those days, he was by nature a philosopher, given to reading a lot of books, both in Sanskrit, English and other languages also. He was a voracious reader and a very good philosopher, keen. He understood the intricacies of philosophy very well, and he had read the Western philosophers also. So he says, I don't want to be like some of the Western philosophers who at the end of their life, after futile arguments and vain reasonings, gave up their life. They could not gain anything by their philosophical discussions. So he says, in the deep darkness of the night, a ray of the moon enters the window, and Faust is lying alone in the room. This is what he has read in the books on philosophy, the biography of Faust, one of a philosopher. He says Faust is lying alone in the room and he is lamenting, alas, I have not been able to understand anything. The study of philosophy and science have served me in vain. Shame on me. These are false words. And M is trying to understand from this example that in his life, if he goes after philosophy, vain philosophy, and the other secular sciences, and does not take up the life of spirit, his life also will be wasted like that of Faust. He says, saying shame on me, saying this, will I then, like him, take up a vial of poison to commit suicide? That is what Faust did. Faust, at the end of all his inquiry and philosophical discussions, found that there is no meaning in life. So that is the problem with unending philosophical discussions which does not result in any conclusion or faith. So faith is a very precious thing, and having got that faith, M believes that I should stick to this faith and leave everything to him, leave everything to my guru, to my God. So he says, otherwise I'll have to suffer the same fate as Faust, who went on a never-ending discussion on these philosophical truths, trying to understand the philosophy of life and reaching no conclusion whatsoever. Or else, like another person, Alistair, who, not being able to bear the burden of ignorance, said, Alistair was another philosopher who, at the end of all his discussions, not coming to any conclusion, and he still thought, there is so much of ignorance, there is so much of things I don't know. So he was so sick of that idea, or so upset, that he placed his head upon a rock and waited for death. That means he was also depressed towards the end of his life. No. So M says, no, I'm not going their way. My life is very precious, and I've got a precious guru and a precious who is my Ishta as well. The guru who is my Ishta, Sri Ramakrishna, and he has come down as a human being to impart that faith unto me, which is very rare even for gods. So having got that faith, let me just hold on to faith and give up all vain discussions. So he says, I do not need to fathom this mystery of the universe. With 1 ounce of intelligence, I am trying to understand this vast universe, which I can never do. And I give that effort. Otherwise, my fate will be like this Faust and Alistair. There is no need to commit suicide because a vessel of 1 seer is not able to contain 4 seers of milk. So if your vessel is limited, if your brain has a limited capacity, you cannot expect the brain to solve your problems for you. The brain is not going to give you a conclusive answer. It has to be, you have to use your other faculties, your faculty of faith, and have faith in the words of the Guru and Ishta. Then he says, a wonderful counsel given by Sri Ramakrishna. He says, I have just my vessel is small, it can hold only 1 seer. Why should I bother to put 4 seers of milk? I'll just confuse myself. Let me make things uncomplicated. Let me make things very simple for myself and listen to the counsel of my Guru. He says, Sri Ramakrishna has given a wonderful counsel, faith in the words of the Guru. O God, give me that faith and let me not wander from here to there for nothing. That which is not bound to happen, don't send me out to find. He's praying to God, he's praying to his Guru, that don't send me out on a futile chase, trying to know things which I can't know. Let me not have this mad race to understand things which are beyond my comprehension. I don't want to end up like Faust and Alistair, who committed suicide because they found this too tiresome, this philosophy, and finally they could not come to any conclusion. The confusion increased all the more. So all these futile attempts in understanding philosophy is just a waste of time and can be extremely dangerous also. So he says, that which is not bound to happen, don't send me out to find. There are certain things which, the mystery of which we cannot unravel, and let us leave it at that. So also Jesus said this, sufficient unto the day the evil thereof. What he meant to say is, don't get involved in things which do not concern you. If certain things do not concern you, why do you stuff your head with things which really are not important at the stage of life in which you are? So he says, just give me faith and let me not wander from here to there for nothing. That which is not bound to happen, don't send me out to find. And what Thakur has instructed, he is trying to recollect what was discussed in the previous conversation. May I gain pure love and devotion at your lotus feet. He is telling his God, who is his Guru, that let me have devotion at your eternal feet. Let me be firm in my faith, love without alloy, and love for God that wells up unbidden out of the depths of the immortal soul. So that type of love which flows like a fountain from the depths of the soul, let me have that kind of faith, that eternal yearning to repeat your name and believe in the power and efficacy of the name of God and His grace and His redeeming grace. So if I have that faith and if I believe in that, in the words of my Guru, then definitely I'll reach the goal. I don't have the need to understand these different intricacies, philosophical intricacies. And may I not be enchanted by your world bewitching Maya. Bless me with this, I pray. The only prayer one should do is that don't confuse me further. Already we are confused with so many occupations. So he says, please, oh Lord, please don't confuse me any further and let me not get more and more confused. That is the only prayer one should do to God. Reflecting over Sri Ramakrishna's incomparable love, Mani returns home by the main road on that dark night. Mani is M. M used to use many pseudonyms. He sometimes called himself Mani or sometimes called himself just a devotee. He was trying to hide his identity, did not want to make his name prominent. So Mani is returning home by the main road on that dark night. He says to himself, what love he has for Girish. Now he is trying to understand the compassion Sri Ramakrishna has for a person like Girish, who was a confirmed drunkard who had taken to evil ways and was rejected even by human society, by the educated people and all the people who did not approve of his immoral behavior. So Sri Ramakrishna kindly, when he surrendered to Sri Ramakrishna accepted him as he is and showered his grace upon him. So this has been a subject of contemplation. He says, M himself is an householder, but he knows that Girish had gone to the other extreme of a householder's life. He was attached to money, he was attached to wealth, he was attached to all lust, greed and all the evils which were possible in a materialistic society. He was given to all that. And yet he had this faith. That made the huge difference. That faith made him surrender to Sri Ramakrishna. I had so much faith in Sri Ramakrishna that Sri Ramakrishna agreed to take up his cause, protect him and purify him, and finally he turns into a wonderful saint. So the process has just begun. But Sri Ramakrishna's wonderful love is creating a kind of amazement in M. M also believes that though he himself is an householder and he doesn't deserve the kind of compassion or love Sri Ramakrishna is showering on him, but seeing Girish, he feels that how great Sri Ramakrishna's love is. So he says, even when Girish, he says to himself, M is now reflecting. He is trying to introspect or trying to understand what is the motive behind this wonderful uh, love of Sri Ramakrishna. He says to himself, what love he has for Girish. Even when Girish has to go to the theatre, he visits his house. That means in those days, theatre and all those professions where good people never engage themselves in that profession. It was not considered to be a noble profession in those days. So it was not just another occupation or another profession. So this, so M is confounded, or M is surprised that even when Girish goes to the theatre, it did not stop him from doing that. Said even though Girish was coming to him, and he did not even stop visiting Girish's home, though he was given to so many evil ways. Because Sri Ramakrishna had faith that Girish's faith will make him change. He could transform Girish, that faith he had, just by his willpower or just by his grace. Sri Ramakrishna could transform Girish and take all his responsibility. He had so much confidence because he knew that once a man has faith, then there is nothing impossible. Even if one has committed a lot of sins and committed a lot of mistakes, there is still hope. So he says, even when Girish has to go to the theatre, he visits his house. Not only that, he doesn't even ask him to renounce, to forsake home, relatives, worldly activities, all for him, and embrace sannyasa. So normally, even if one has been given to evil ways, sometimes people like great saints like Valmiki, they just gave up their home and became great sages, though they had a very bad past. But in Girish's case, he doesn't even ask him to give up all his profession, his household and all. He just accepts him as it is. I understand it has a deep meaning. Unless the time is ripe, unless one has developed deep dispassion, renunciation will be painful for Girish. So he has understood that, according to Sri Ramakrishna's own teachings, sometimes when you are deeply immersed in worldly life, it is better to allow that worldliness to go bit by bit and then finally suggest renunciation. That's why Sri Ramakrishna was very careful when he talked to householder disciples. He did not want to, because he knew many people were not capable of doing it. As Jesus could openly say that one cannot have God and mammon at the same time, and many people, though they believed in his grace, they felt that they could not renounce everything and go after him. Only a few selected disciples who chose to go with him, who had the courage to renounce, they went with him. So also, Sri Ramakrishna knows that I cannot force renunciation in a person who is immersed in worldliness. He has to first get rid of that worldliness, and then perhaps you can expect him to renounce or have some kind of self-control. So M has understood this, and he says the reason why he is allowing Girish to continue his profession and do all these things, because the time is not ripe for him to give up everything, and that will not help. And Thakur himself gave a wonderful example. Sri Ramakrishna himself says that the renunciation of such a person will be painful. It is just like if you remove the scab from a wound, before the wound is healed, it will bleed and be painful. It takes a lot of time for the scab to dry, and then it falls off by itself, or you can remove it. But if you remove that scab when the wound is new and fresh, it will start bleeding again, and then it will take a lot of time to heal. So M gives this example which he heard from Sri Ramakrishna, that unless the time is ripe for total renunciation, one should not renounce. That's why Sri Ramakrishna is a bit careful. When he's talking to Narendra, he talks in a different language. When he's talking to Girish, he talks in a different language, because he knows people are at different stages of spiritual development, and each one has to take the path of least resistance and follow that path so that the renunciation becomes natural. It should not be forced on anybody. He says, when the wound has healed, the scab will fall off by itself. Ordinary men who have no insight ask you to renounce the word immediately. There are some people who don't have patience with their disciples. They say you have to renounce immediately. If you don't renounce, then don't come to me. There definitely there were a uh, lot of movements in the world, not only in India but all over the world, where renunciation was insisted upon. Even the great Buddhistic religion, Buddha said you can't get nirvana if you don't renounce. So even the big kings and all the princes, they gave up their wealth and had to renounce, and that's why the monasteries became full, because he preached the monastic way, and he believed that unless you take up to some kind of monasticism or at least have the monastic spirit, it will be very difficult to control the desires. And if you don't control the desires, which are the root cause of all our suffering, then you can't get nirvana. So there were some, but Sri Ramakrishna is much more liberal in the sense he believes in a gradual renunciation for some people who cannot renounce immediately. So he says the Sadguru, this Sadguru, I mean he is considering Sri Ramakrishna as the Sadguru. Sadguru means one who is a real perceptor, a real guru. This sea of motiveless grace is the ocean of love. Day and night he cares only to do good to mankind, whatever stage they are in. If one is in a lower stage, he talks to him in that way. He comes down to his plane to lift them up from their plane or their level of existence. And also see what faith Girish has. Now it is not that Girish doesn't deserve the love and care of Sri Ramakrishna. There are so many evil people who were surrounding Dakshineshwar and who used to be very bad, very cruel, and they were so bad to Sri Ramakrishna himself. Some of them were very selfish, very worldly, and they also lived there. But Sri Ramakrishna did not shower his grace on every one of them. There are certain qualities which Girish had, in spite of his evil background or his worldly background. He had a tremendous faith which saved him. He says what faith Girish has. It was just 2 days after he had seen Thakur that he said, Lord, you are God indeed. You have come in a human body for my salvation. I remember the same thing was uttered by Josephine MacLeod when she met Swami Vivekananda. I was immediately impressed by her guru, whom she considered as a friend. And every word he said, miraculously, she gobbled up everything and had tremendous faith when she met him for the first time. And then she believed very firmly. She would always tell that Swami Vivekananda came to give freedom to me. It was to make me free he came. So also, Girish was so confident that Sri Ramakrishna, if he has taken up a human body, it is just to redeem people, sinners like me, and take us from this, relieve us from all the worldly suffering. So he says, Girish is right in saying, Girish said to Thakur, Lord, you are God indeed. You have come in a human body for my salvation. And this he said only 2 days after meeting him. He did not have doubts like M had. M had to visit several times before he has started developing a little devotion and love for and faith in the words of his guru. But Girish was not like that. He had this exceptional faith and exceptional quality which made him surrender his 100% to Sri Ramakrishna. So he says, Girish is right in saying, how can God instruct like a member of the family without taking up a human body? So Girish was, when he argued with Narendra, he said, unless he takes up a human body, how could people who are so worldly like me understand? That was Girish's argument. If somebody did not show me by coming down to my level, by showering the human love on me, because I don't understand God's love and the spiritual love and all those high things. I just understand human love. And he had that experience that throughout his life, he was always hated by human beings. So he knew there is not a single human being who would accept Girish as he was and love him. So he was looking for that love, and here he finds an incarnation who has come in the form, taken up a human body, and who loves him with the same human love which a human being does, and he loves him so much and accepts him. So he found that can I in this world, in this very selfish world, where people just make a show of love, can I find? I have found a love which is so human, so touching, so intimate that he is forgiving all of my sins and he has taken all my responsibilities. He says, who can make us realize? First, he says, how can God instruct like a member of the family without taking up a human body? So we feel that he is one's own. Yesterday we discussed, Holy Mother said, your job is done if you have enough faith and you consider God to be your own. If you consider God to be your own, like a member of your family, then you don't have to do anything. All the spiritual practices are just to deepen this relationship with God. If that comes, then what else is there? That is what Girish believed. So that's why he said, I can't do any spiritual discipline. I just believe in you that you are come as a human being to save me. And who can make us realize that only God is real and all else is unreal? That unreality of the world, which Girish could not have got even if he had read 100 books and met 100 people. But by a single touch, Sri Ramakrishna made him feel slowly, gradually of course, that this world is real and God is the only reality in this world with which we should have any really kind of relationship and hold on to that divinity or that godhood. So he says, who can lift the weak child having fallen on the ground by holding his hand? So if a child falls, it is only the mother who can hold the child and lift him from the ground. There's no other way. Who can make a man attached to lust and gold, lust and greed, kamini kanchan as they say, and of the nature of an animal eligible for eternal life? So M is asking this question. A person who has all the animal propensities, who lives in the sense world and enjoys the world just as an animal would do, such a person, can he be made eligible for eternal life? If somebody can pull us out from uh, this miserable existence, the nature of an animal eligible for eternal and make us fit for eternal life, it is only a human being who has incarnated, God who has incarnated as a human being can do it. And if he does not live with them as a human being, how will they whose inmost self is one with him, who does not want anything but God, spend their lives? That is why in the Gita it is said, M is saying, if he does not live with them as a human being, if he was living somewhere in heavens and promised them that you will get heaven if you do this, how will people believe in somebody who has not incarnated in flesh and blood? Though we have to worship God in spirit, but if he comes as one of us in flesh and blood, lives with us, moves with us, and makes us feel that he is our own, only then we can spend our lives fruitfully. That then our spiritual life has meaning. What other meaning is there? If you believe in spirit, then you have to live that life of spirit. So that's why Jesus very often said that God should be worshipped as spirit and by the spirit as spirit. So that eternal life, when we consider that eternal Godhood or eternal Brahman or eternal Satchidananda has incarnated as a human being, whether you call him the Son of God, whether you call an avatara, whether you call him a saint, but that manifestation of the eternal spirit in a human being who lives with us, who mixes with us, who can come down to our level and explain to us, who can even weep with us, who can not only express his joy with us. It is not that Sri Ramakrishna always was in ecstasy and showered his grace and joy with all others. There were occasions when people afflicted with a lot of sorrow, a old man had lost his son. So he was so dejected and so depressed that somebody brought him to Sri Ramakrishna. And he was weeping all the way. He was weeping because he had lost his only son, a very young son. And he was weeping, he was crying. And all of them, all the devotees were just looking at Thakur. What kind of advice will he give him? Will he give him some spiritual advice? Will he give him and tell him that the Atman cannot die? This life is transitory and all those things, as most of us would do. When it comes to somebody else's suffering, we can conveniently tell them that, oh, this is all temporary, you don't have to bother. But Sri Ramakrishna did not do that. He started weeping as if he had lost his own son. So he started weeping and everybody was surprised. What is this? He has come for some consolation and Sri Ramakrishna is himself weeping as if he has lost his own son. And both of them, and gradually there was a transformation in that old man. He came over his grief. He managed to get rid of his grief, and then slowly Sri Ramakrishna told him about the eternal nature of the soul, that the soul does not die. But he did not tell him in the beginning. He first cried with him. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna's M says, unless God comes, shares our joys and sufferings also. It's not enough if he just shares his joy with us. God is full of joy, no doubt. But at the same time, he has the capacity to come down to our level, be with us when we are suffering. Otherwise, what's the fun in having an eternal companion like God or an avatara with us? The very fact that he will be there in both sorrow and joy, both joy and sorrow, that makes our life meaningful. To dedicate our life to depend on somebody who we feel secure that whatever happens in joy as well as in pain, in joy as well as in sorrow, there is one to whom we can turn to. So that's why M is repeating the verse number 8 from the 4th chapter of the Gita, and he says, Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma sansthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. For the protection of the good, for the destruction of the wicked, and for the establishment of dharma, I take birth in age after age. So destruction means the destruction of ignorance, not physical destruction. So Sri Ramakrishna and all the incarnations come to destroy the life of the world and to establish the kingdom of the spirit within you. That is why when Jesus said the kingdom of God is within you, what he meant is, and then he also said, I have come here not to destroy but to fulfill. So they don't come to destroy the spirit, they come to fulfill a human being. They destroy his evil propensities, as Sri Krishna is saying here, and they destroy the evil propensities in man so that the eternal good which is within comes out and people can live an eternal life. Then he says, now after Girish, M is trying to compare his love for Naren, which was different. He loved Girish in spite of all his evil nature, in spite of all his bad habits, and he showered his compassion on him. And he knew that Girish has to wait. He had patience with him. He has to wait till he was fit enough to renounce. But on the other hand, he was so confident that Naren had the capacity to renounce immediately. So he says, what love? He is mad for Narendra, weeps for Narayan. Narayan was another disciple who was very pure, because he had once said that these pure souls who have not touched woman and gold, who have not touched Kamini and Kanchan, These pure souls are like pure flowers which can be offered at the altar at the feet of the Divine Mother. I can't offer other flowers which have been smelt, which have been touched by the world, which have been spoilt by the world. So he used to have special love for some of the younger disciples like Rakhal, Bhavanath, Purna, Baburam and the rest. So M is trying to compare his love for worldly people. At the same time, he is trying to show that he had a special kind of love also, or more love for people who had given up the world for his sake, who were not tempted by the world, who were not worldly in that sense. So he says, what love he had for Narendra. He weeps for Narayan. Narayan is another young disciple. He says, these and other young men like Rakal, Bhavnath, Purna, Baburam and the rest are Narayana, God himself. They have come to earth in a human body for my sake. So he could recognize that there were some people who had this inbuilt renunciation, who came as companions of the Lord, who were specially selected for a special mission of his, and he considered themselves as manifestations of Narayana, of God himself, not considering them to be any different from himself. He says, just as I have come with a human body, Sri Ramakrishna is to believe that these little souls, these great souls have come as taking up the human body to assist me in the work. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna M is referring to, that Sri Ramakrishna used to love these young disciples because they would be his companions and they had the element of Narayana, they had this divinity in full measure because they were born pure, they were born with this spirit of renunciation. Then he says, I say this love is not born of human intellect. Human intellect will love another person who is intelligent, but he will not love pure people. He does not have any value for purity. In fact, in the world of academic excellence and learning, they don't bother as long as you are intelligent, as long as you deliver, you do some good research, what kind of private life or personal life you lead. People don't seem to be bothered. They don't seem to be bothered what kind of character you are if you are intelligent. That is the importance one gives to academic excellence and intelligence. There can be people who can be highly intelligent but can be very bad as human beings, or there can be very ordinary people who may not be as intelligent as others, who may not be as competitive and intelligent as others, but they are excellent human beings. They have this wonderful quality. So it is not just academic skills but life skills which also matter. But M says people don't appreciate, because he says it is only an incarnation or great souls who can understand this. I say this love is not born out of human intellect. Sri Ramakrishna loved Latu, who did not even go to school. He loved Narendra, who was a university graduate. He considered them to be he loved all of them equally, though there was a difference in academic learning in both of them. He says, I say this love is not born of human intellect. It's not born out of human wisdom alone. It is something far deeper, far spiritual. He says, these boys are pure souls who have not touched women with carnal intentions. So right from childhood, they have not touched women with any bad intention. So they have not developed greed, they have not developed pride, they have not developed envy and the like by engaging in worldly activities. So somehow Mother has kept them pure and prevented them from losing their purity. So that's why he says naturally Sri Ramakrishna would see the divine more in them. So he says, so there is greater manifestation of God in them, and that is why he loves to be in their company. But who has such vision? So M is lamenting that if I tell this to people who just bother about academic excellence and intellectual attainments, they will not be able to appreciate this simple idea of Sri Ramakrishna, who could see through a person, through the personality of a person, and gauge how much of purity, how much of divinity he had. Now, depending on the amount of purity one has. That's why Jesus also said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." He did not say, "Blessed are the intelligent among you." He didn't say, "Blessed are the wise." He didn't say that. He said, "Blessed are the pure in heart." Because this purity of heart is the only precondition for spirituality or spiritual experiences. So that's why he says, but who has got such vision? Thakur has the insight. Only Sri Ramakrishna has this insight, as Jesus said, to tell and to accept a person as more divine depending on his purity, because the light of divinity shines through if the medium is pure. If it is opaque, the light does not shine through. So Sri Ramakrishna could gauge the divinity by seeing the opacity of a personality, of a person. The purity of a person. The more pure a person, the more transparent he is, the more straightforward he is, the more simple he is. And that results in the divinity shining through them, shining through their entire personality, as it were. You don't have to speak to do that. You just have, it just shines through that. But that insight everybody does not have. We just see the external of a person. We can't gauge his purity, as Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna could immediately understand. He could not stand the presence of certain people, though they were highly respected in society or highly intelligent, very wealthy, very powerful, and people used to respect them. Ordinary people used to respect them because of their spiritual attainments or because of their worldly attainments. But Sri Ramakrishna could see through their personality, see the pride, see the ego they had, see the arrogance they had, and without even talking to them, he could understand. Because the moment he saw the spiritual light shining through some of the people, even though they would have been uneducated or illiterate like Latu, who was a simple shepherd boy, was working as a servant in Ram Datta's house. When he came, Sri Ramakrishna could see that divinity shining, that purity which he had maintained, which he was like that wonderful fresh flower which can be offered to God. So he says, it is Sri Ramakrishna alone who has this vision. That's why who else can understand? Only he can understand. Thakur has the insight. He sees everything. He sees everything. He sees who is attached to the world, who is simple, who is magnanimous, who is a devotee of God. He serves such devotees as the Lord himself. The devotees who are pure, whom he sees as transparent, as simple, as magnanimous, he understands them and then respects them, gives them the due respect because he sees the divinity shining inside them. Once somebody, in a very gross way, said, "Why are you so much attached to Narendra? Why are you giving so much attention to him? Is it because he is your favorite disciple? Why can't others who are coming to you, why can't you give the same kind of attention or same kind of love to those people? Why are you so fascinated? Or maybe why are you so much attracted to Narendra? Is it a kind of attachment?" That was the question which was asked by one of the devotees, who was perhaps a little jealous that Sri Ramakrishna was giving more attention to his favorite disciple, whom he considered to be the best disciple, Narendranath. And Sri Ramakrishna, like a guileless child, at the beginning he also thought, yes, maybe am I guilty of showing some special love and respect or love and affection for Narendranath? So he goes to his mother, Divine Mother, because whenever he had any doubts, like a simple child used to go and pray. And he goes and prays and then comes and scolds the devotee who told him. He said, "Don't tell me this again." I went to mother and asked. He said, "Am I getting attached to Narendra?" Then mother told him, the Divine Mother in a divine voice told him, that the day you love him because you see the divinity shining in him. So wherever you see more divinity shining, the more the divine element percolating out of that personality, the more love you have for that person. The day you don't see Narayana in Narendra, you will not even look at his face. So that is what Sir M is saying, that he can see through the people, and that is why he has preference for some people who who belong to the inner circle. Many people thought, why did he make that distinction if he was so gracious, that these people belong to the inner circle, the antarangas as he called them, and some people who were devotees whom he was very fond of everybody, but at the same time he showed some special, because he knew that here is somebody who can carry forward the spiritual treasure which I have unearthed because of my sadhana, due to my sadhana, and these people will be the carriers of that treasure, and they will shower it upon the entire humanity. So that is why he says, but still he says, he serves such devotees as Lord himself, such pure devotees, but he helps them wash, puts them to bed, weeps to see them, rushes to Calcutta for them. He beseeches others to bring them by cab from Calcutta. Now there were some group of devotees who were very pure, very humble, very simple, but did not have the money to come and visit Dakshineshwar often. So he was so much concerned that he would tell his rich devotees to sometimes help them, bring them by cab. And he was so concerned that they should not feel inconvenienced because of the lack of transport facilities, because of their poverty. All of them were not so rich, and they are facing a lot of difficulties. So there were some of the disciples whom he was particularly fond of, these disciples or devotees, and he used to take extra pains to tell Balram and other people who could afford to travel in carriages to bring them to Dakshineshwar, or sometimes if he was invited to their house, he would tell them, why don't you invite these people? Let them, they really deserve some kind of spiritual guidance and spiritual help. So let them come and enjoy, or let them come and enjoy this holy company, satsanga. So he says, he often asks his other rich householder devotees, invite them to a meal. This will do you good. See, he was concerned about the rich people also. He said, if you feed such sincere devotees, if you call them and then feed them, then it will be a great merit for you. You have the money, you spend it on it is better than spending it on useless things. You spend it on such devotees. That will do you good. So M is enumerating everything that Sri Ramakrishna's love made him do to cater to the needs of different disciples, different devotees, depending on their needs. So he was so considerate, he could come down to the level, to the worldly level, to the level of the gross world level, and think about the others' finances, their difficulties, even their gross difficulties, which were preventing them from practicing spirituality. Then he says, is it worldly love or pure or divine love? Now many people may think, if one is bothering so much about the fare and about bringing people by carriage and do this and do that, instead of giving spiritual advice, is this worldly love? So M is asking this question, is it worldly love? He is asking, or is it divine love? He says no. Is it worldly love or pure divine love? One worships God in an earthen image. Now he is giving an answer based on what he heard from Sri Ramakrishna. He says, if one can worship God in an image by offering different kinds of prasad and different kinds of food items and fragrant incense sticks and all those things, we spend so much money in lighting candles and all those things. He says, if we can do so much and serve the God in image materially, then should we not serve the human being who is live? Then can he not be worshipped in a pure human body? Can't he then be worshipped in a pure human body? Besides, these people are not just human beings. They are helpers of the Lord in his every divine sport. They are his intimate companions in every incarnation. That is why some of the rich disciples, they were very few indeed, because everybody did not have that keen sense. They did a lot to support these young disciples who had renounced everything and were serving Sri Ramakrishna in Kashipur. We'll come to that Shampukur days. The next chapter is on that only. How Sri Ramakrishna's disciples, the monastic disciples, the would-be monastic disciples, the young disciples who were pure, took care of him, while the other householder disciples who were wise and who had a magnanimous heart contributed. They all contributed some money to see that Sri Ramakrishna's care was taken by these by these young disciples. So they are his intimate companions. So M is saying, why can't we at least do some kind of gross help? Then he gazes at Narendra, he forgets the external world. So now he's telling, now when he comes to Girish, he's helping him in one way. When he comes to Chinu, he's helping him in another way by arranging his carriage and all those things. But when he gazes at Narendra, he forgets the external world, because he sees this divinity shining very powerfully. So he's not bothered about Naren's other things, other gross things. He knows that Naren is a person, Vivekananda, who is the future apostle and whose divinity was very, very brightly shining through his personality. Then gradually he forgets the embodied Narendra. He forgets that the body of Narendra. He thinks that he is pure spirit, because he saw him as such. He was born as a pure spirit, a dedicated. He was the Nara Rishi, as he said. He forgets the apparent man and sees only the real man inside Narendra. His mind merges into indivisible existence, knowledge, bliss absolute, Satchidananda. And seeing which he sometimes becomes mute and motionless and sometimes mutters Om Om. So the moment he used to see Narendra, many times he used to utter some sacred words. And that is why Sri Ramakrishna is saying, M is saying that Sri Ramakrishna used to lose his consciousness, because seeing the high level of consciousness in Narendra, his mind also would be taken to a high level. But when he dealt with ordinary devotees, he could come down. That is the greatness of an incarnation. Now M is trying to tell us that when an incarnation incarnates, he can bring his mind to a level to suit the devotee. And when he comes across pure souls like Narendra, his attitude changes and he can lift his mind again to the highest level and give him what he wants. So he gives all the devotees what they deserve and takes them up, lifts them up from the state in which they are. He doesn't expect all to have the same kind of renunciation, same kind of unworldliness as Narendra. But he says, when he's mad, when he sees he repeats mother like a child. He sees more of the spiritual manifestation in Narendra. He is mad repeating Naren Naren when he is in samadhi. He can see that here is a person who is manifesting this divinity fully. Narendra does not believe in God incarnating as man. But what does that matter? See, Girish believes in that God incarnates as human being, because he knows that unless he comes as a human being, he cannot grasp it, he cannot understand Sri Ramakrishna, he could not understand divinity, he cannot understand that love, whereas Naren doesn't require a human form to transform him. He is already reached a high plane. Thakur has this divine insight. He does not bother if Naren does not accept him as an incarnation. He has seen that it is the pride of personality in him. God is very much our own. He is our own mother, not an adopted one. Not a merely biological mother. God is our own mother, our own father. Why does he not make us understand? Why does he not strike a light in compassion and show the reality? Perhaps that is why Thakur said, do you feel that your dignity has been wounded? Be it so. We are of the same mind as you and we feel for you. Now, this is what he is telling Narendra, that he even if he doesn't understand or he doesn't want to understand that whether God comes as a human being or God incarnates or not, he is not bothered, because he belongs to an entirely different plane, or maybe he has an entirely different attitude towards God, towards Satchidananda, towards reality. So he says it doesn't matter. It cannot be difficult with one's dearest of dear, with whom one can be so. Blessed are you, Narendranath, because Naren felt that Sri Ramakrishna is his own. They are of the same spirit, they are of the same, the soul was intimately connected. So, whether the body is an incarnation or not, it doesn't matter, because he lives in the world of spirit and is happy to consider Sri Ramakrishna as the highest expression of consciousness of Satchidananda, and that is more important to him, because that was his attitude, the monistic attitude, the attitude of an Advaitin, where he considers everything as the manifestation of the universal spirit. So for an Advaitin, from an Advaitin point of view, he may or may not accept in the idea of incarnation, because he is not gross at all. The gross ideas do not come to him. He can keep his mind on a very high plane. That's why Sri Ramakrishna is to respect and appreciate that Naren alone among all the disciples is fit for this Advaita knowledge. Otherwise, he did not encourage even Abhedanandji and other disciples. He said, it is devotion. It is the path of devotion that is more natural to you. First, try to understand God as a human being, and then start loving him and try to make him your own. And then you will understand God as the soul of the souls. So these are the different levels of understanding when one traverses the spiritual path. So he says, if one cannot be difficult with one's dearest of dear, with whom can one be so? Blessed are you, Narendranath. This Supreme Person has so much love for you. Seeing you becomes inspired by God so easily. Reflecting thus, with Sri Ramakrishna in their minds, the devotees return home in the deep of night. Now these are the ideas which have come to Sri Ramakrishna, and he believes that the devotees also must be thinking on these lines. It is not, he is not very sure. I mean, we are not very sure whether other devotees had the same kind of understanding as M had or Master Mashay had. But definitely M, after recording all these conversations, has come to the conclusion that these may be, some of the devotees may be having these ideas that Sri Ramakrishna, the special relationship he had with Narendra is because of the high level of attainment he had, considering Sri Ramakrishna's soul as his own. That in dualism, in non-dualism, in Advaita, you consider the same universal spirit, all pervading spirit in every human being. So you don't look down upon anybody. You consider, but for that one has to have that capacity. And of all the disciples, since Naren had that capacity, Sri Ramakrishna loved him dearly. Not that he didn't love others, but he had different methods, different ways of guiding different people. So this chapter is over, and next time we will start section 15, where Sri Ramakrishna is in joyous conversations with Ishan, Dr. Sarkar, Girish and other devotees in the new house in Shampukur. He has already left Dakshineshwar, and they had shifted for a few months to Shampukur before finally coming to Kashipur, where he went into Mahasamadhi. So that Shampukur conversations we will take up tomorrow. So I conclude now, and if there are some questions, we can. Yes. Any questions? Yes. Sharon want to ask some question? Yes, please carry on.
Pranams, Maharaj.
Okay, namaste. You want to ask some question? Yes, yes.
It's actually something you mentioned in Mother's class
Okay.
about Girish.
Yes.
It just struck me, how is it that the incarnation of the age, our Tuckle,
Mm.
his whole cancer on the throat was attributed to Girish's sins?
Yeah,
Surely
physical.
isn't it that he would be digesting so
Yes.
much of all our sins, isn't it?
Yes, yes. Because
But it seemed Girish was blamed almost.
no, he knew that Girish would not be able to bear the consequences of his sins. So if any transformation has to take place, he has to partake a little bit of it, which he did. And obviously, he had to finish his Leela, in the incarnation as Krishna, in the incarnation as Rama also. They had to have an excuse to leave this world. So anyway, Girish deserved that perhaps because of his faith. So Sri Krishna was kind enough to take his sins upon himself. So that because the body, the karma, law of karma is made by Lord himself. So he doesn't want to change the law of karma. The law of karma is equal. You can't have law of karma and you can just, of course, the Lord is the master of the law of karma, so he can change it. But normally he doesn't change because he has to set an example before the world. Now, according to Girish's karma, he had to suffer. But then Thakur decided, okay, if he cannot bear, let me take a little bit of his karma so that he gets a chance to transform himself and become a spiritual person, which he did. If he had not taken that, perhaps Girish would not have had the opportunity to realize his spiritual potential. You see how much transformation. Girish became a saintly person towards the end of his life. If he had not lived, his spiritual efforts would have concluded, would have not fructified, That's why.
Thank you, Maharaj. May I ask one more question?
Yes, yes,
To do with japa.
yes.
It seems we're told we shouldn't go over the mother bead, but you can think too much worrying about going over the mother bead when you're trying to concentrate on the mantra, no? Why is it we shouldn't continue over that mother bead?
Continue what?
In the mala,
Mala, okay, mala, okay. Mala
it
is
tells we shouldn't
actually not
move japa.
advised. Yes, yes. We should not because mala is a gross thing. Because we can't count on our fingers, sometimes a mala is prescribed. But according to the mantra shastra, the lowest type of repetition of mantra is repeating loudly with the mala. Then if you don't repeat loudly but repeat in the mind and use your mala, you don't use your mala but use your fingers, then it is a slightly higher and better type of repetition. But if you repeat spontaneously, just as a fountain, fountain coming out from the heart, the mantra goes on incessantly like a undercurrent. That is the highest repetition. That is the highest type of japa. So there is no rule that you should not do, but one has to go on improving, isn't it? So the more subtle you become, the more effective the mantra becomes. If you repeat it in a gross way, you will get the gross benefits. If you repeat it in a subtle way, it will help you to improve your mind and the mental states. And if you still go further, repeat in a very, very subtle way as an undercurrent, then it will reduce or destroy the seeds of your karma also. So the higher the type of mantra repetition, the greater the benefit. But if we can't do it, we have to do it. At least something is better than nothing. So that's why they say, okay, you do it instead of gossiping. At least one can do, even if beads are required. And there's nothing wrong in that, in using the beads. But one should always understand that there are higher and higher ways of repeating the mantra. Okay? There's nothing wrong, absolutely. But the attention should not be on the counting. I mean, then you will always be concerned about, oh, acha, I have finished two mala or the rosary. I have to finish one more. So that feeling should not be there. You just go on doing spontaneously, and count is just done to bring some kind of discipline in the initial stages. If you have a fixed number of malas, if you do rosary rounds, then you know I have done 5 rounds today. So tomorrow I should not be doing one round. I should at least do 6 or at least 5. So that is first in the initial stages. To increase gradually, the mala is used. At that time, it may be very useful, but not always. Okay?
Just can happen. You drop the mala, you think you're coming in some absorption, and then you think your mind goes off, so you pick the mala again, but then actually you can then think, oh, I shouldn't go over the mother bead, is it?
No,
So,
no, no. That is not. If it falls down because of your absorption, if it falls because you went to sleep, then it is different. But if it falls, if you are really absorbed and you are so much focused on the mantra that you have just forgotten to do the japa, that's a very good state. The mala should fall off that way. But normally it doesn't fall off. It falls off because we are tired and we just doze off. And then we just lose the grip over the mala. So that should not happen.
thank you,
Okay?
Maharaj.
Okay. So shall I take your leave, or are there any more questions? Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.